We are going to start cycle 3. Cycle 3 is pages 184 to 190. When we're reading this, I want you to be taking notes. There are points where I will tell you that this is something that you need to make a note of. Make a note of it. Open up your books. We are on chapter 16. I had to fight like a tiger to wake up the next morning. The first thing I saw was those horses thumbtacked all over the wall. I stretched and noticed my shirt was off. I kicked my legs and could tell I was under the covers with one sheet underneath me and one sheet on top of me, and my pants were off too. Boy, I must have really been tired last night. I couldn't even remember getting undressed and getting between the sheets. But that explained why I was sleeping so hard. I found out one of the rich people's secrets. Sleeping with two sheets puts you out like a baby that's been rode around in an automobile. I looked over and thought I was dreaming. My clothes were all folded up in a neat pile in the same way Mama used to fold them when she'd go to work before I got up. I blinked my eyes a couple times, 'cause it looked like there was a note on my clothes. Mama would always leave me a note that said something like, "Dear Bud, please be neater. See you tonight. I love you." My eyes started getting all stingy, but I blinked them a bunch more times and the note disappeared. I kept blinking, but the pile of clothes stayed right where it was. Ah, shucks. Miss Thomas must have come in at night and undressed me and put me in bed. I bet she got a real good look at my legs. I got up as quiet as I could and put my clothes back on. I could hear laughing and talking coming from downstairs. Right when I got near the kitchen door, I could hear Herman E. Calloway saying, "So that's how that cookie's gonna crumble." Miss Thomas said, "You have no idea how bad those orphanages can be. It's no place to be raised. I can't believe you. You'll take care of any stray dog wandering through this neighborhood, but when it comes to a child, all of a sudden you have no sympathy. You might not have been paying attention, but we agreed last night what we were going to do about that boy, and that's what we're sticking to." Uh-oh. I was glad I didn't take anything out of my suitcase, 'cause it looked like I might be making a break for the street again. Hermione Calloway said, "Like I said, I'ma find out what the real story is in Flint, and then we'll see." Miss Thomas said, "That's fine. I believe the child. You above all people should know I've got a sense about when someone is lying." Uh-oh, I'd have to remember that. She kept talking. "Until we've heard otherwise from Flint, he's staying right here." A fourth voice said, "Well, I'm glad to hear it. That means I didn't go digging around in the basement for nothing. I think he's really gonna like this." It was Steady Eddie, and it sounded like he had something for me. I ran back up the steps on my tiptoes and down the hall to the little dead girl's room. This is where I'd like you to make a note. So in your notebook, make a note of that's how he refers to this room. His room at Grand Calloway Station, he calls the little dead girl's room. We'll see if he always calls it that, but make sure you make that note. I stood outside the room and closed the door loud enough that they could hear it downstairs. I clumped down the hall to the door that Miss Thomas said was the bathroom. When I was done, I pulled on a chain that made the water come down. The loud noise made me jump back. Man, these inside the house outhouses were hard to get used to. I washed my hands with running hot water and closed the bathroom door kinda loud. I clumped down the steps, stopping a couple times to yawn real loud. When I walked into the kitchen, they all had looks on their faces like they hadn't been talking about me at all. I said, "Good morning, Mr. Calloway," but I didn't really mean it. Then said, "Good morning, Miss Thomas. Good morning, Mr. Jimmy. Good morning, Steady Eddie." I noticed right away that Miss Thomas didn't have all her diamond rings on. I guess it would have been real hard sleeping with them flashing up at you. She must have to keep them closed up in a box that the sparkles can't get out of. I noticed too that even without the rings, Miss Thomas still had to be the most beautiful woman in the world. They smiled and said, "Good morning, Bud," all except Herman E. Calloway. He got up from the table and said, "I don't like the way Ludine is sounding. I'ma have to look at her plugs." He went outside through a door at the back of the kitchen. Miss Thomas said, "Bud, we'd just about given up on you. Do you usually sleep until afternoon?" Afternoon? Man, I couldn't believe it. I'd slept as long as those rich folks in the moving pictures. "No, ma'am. That's the first time I ever did that." She said, "I know you must be starving, but if you can hold out for another half hour or so, Mr. Jimmy's gonna make everyone's lunch. Think you can wait?" "Yes, ma'am." A half hour wasn't nothing to wait, no matter how hungry you were. Mr. Jimmy said, "So what's the scoop, little man?" I didn't know what that meant, so I said, "Nothing, sir." Steady Eddie said, "How'd you sleep, kiddo?" "Great, sir." "Oops, I forgot I wasn't supposed to call the bandmen sir." He said, "Cop a squat." He pointed at a chair. I guessed that meant sit down, so I did. Miss Thomas said, "Were your ears burning last night, Bud?" Man, all these Grand Rapids people really do talk funny. I only came to the other side of the state, and it was like they talked some strange language out here. I said, "What, ma'am?" She said, "There's an old saying that when people talk about you behind your back, your ears start to get real warm, kind of like they were burning." I said, "No, ma'am, my ears felt just fine." She said, "Well, they should have been burning. You were the subject of a long conversation last night. But as sound asleep as you were, I'm really not all that surprised you didn't notice. I had to check your pulse to make sure you were still alive." Shucks, I knew it. She did come in when I was conked out and took my doggone pants and shirt off and put me there. Man, this was real embarrassing. Miss Thomas said, "Mr. Calloway and the band and I talked about you for a long time. We've come up with something we want to discuss with you, but we need your help in deciding what to do." Uh-oh, that was Rules and Things number 38, or something. That meant I was gonna have to get ready and go fetch something for her. I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "We've got to talk to some people in Flint first, but if they say it's all right, we were hoping you'd stay here at Grand Calloway Station for a while." A gigantic smile split my face in half. Miss Thomas said, "I'm gonna assume that smile means yes?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." Miss Thomas said, "Before that grin gets stuck on your face, let me tell you you're gonna have lots of chores and things to take care of around here, Bud. You'll be expected to pull your own weight the best you can. We all like a very clean house, and none of us are too used to having children around. So we're all gonna have to learn to be patient with each other. There's one person in particular that you're gonna have to be very patient with. Do you know who I mean?" I sure did. "Yes, ma'am, it's Mr. Calloway." She said, "Good boy. Give him some time. He really needs help with a lot of different things. He swears someone's adding weight onto that bass fiddle of his every year. But he's just getting older. He can use some young wiry hands to help him around. Think you could handle that?" Now I knew for sure she'd looked at my legs. She must have thought I was a real weakling. I said, "Yes, ma'am. My legs are a lot stronger than they look. Most folks are surprised by that." Miss Thomas said, "I don't doubt that at all, Bud. I'm not worried about your body being strong. I'm more concerned about your spirit. Lord knows Mr. Calloway is going to give it a test." I said, "Yes, ma'am. My spirit's a lot stronger than it looks, too. Most folks are really surprised by that." She smiled and said, "Very good. But you know what, Bud?" "What, ma'am?" "I knew you were an old toughie the minute I saw you." I smiled again. We're going to pause right there as we go back to our quiz. It brings up the quote that we just read, the one about Lord knows Mr. Calloway is going to give it a test. What does she mean? What does she mean by giving it a test? If you have trouble with this question, I want you to think about Mr. Calloway's attitude towards Bud. Does she suspect that Bud's spirit won't be strong enough? Does she think that Bud might provoke Mr. Calloway and try to upset him? Does that seem like Bud? Does Bud usually try to upset people? Is it that she doesn't think he's mature enough? Did they talk about maturity? Or is she hoping that Bud can tolerate Mr. Calloway's impatient temper? Use your magic maybes and come up with the right answer. And then move on to cycle 4.